I've never shared this with anyone before, because for a long time I didn't have the words to describe it. Even now, years later, I still question whether it happened at all, or if my mind created something to fill in the hours that disappeared from my life. All I know is that one night I went for a walk beneath a quiet Wyoming sky, and when I came home, nothing about the world felt the same again. It started on a Wednesday, late October. The air smelled like frost and pine. It was one of those nights where you can hear the wind moving miles away before it reaches you. I'd been fixing a generator in the garage until around 11. When I finally shut everything down, I noticed how still it was outside. No crickets, no distant highway, just silence so deep it almost hummed. I stepped out to lock the shed, coffee mug still in hand. The stars looked unusually close that night, sharp and motionless. I remember thinking the sky looked too perfect, like someone had drawn it. That's when Daisy, my old shepherd mix, started growling. Not barking, just this low, uncertain growl that I'd never heard from her before. Her eyes were locked on the far side of the field, where the trees begin. There was a light, pale, soft, almost silver, glowing between the trees. It didn't flicker like a flame or swing like a flashlight. It just pulsed slowly, the way your heartbeat feels when you're holding your breath. I took a few steps forward, squinting, trying to see who it was. Hunters, maybe. But no footsteps, no voices, nothing. Just that strange pulse of light. The air shifted. I can't describe it better than that tit just changed. Heavier, thicker. The hum in the silence became louder, deep enough to feel in my ribs. I remember setting down my mug and whispering Daisy's name, but my voice didn't sound right. It felt small, like it got swallowed by the air around me. Then everything stopped, completely. The wind, the dog, even the sound of my heartbeat. For a few seconds, it was as if the world had been paused. The light rose above the trees, smooth, effortless, like it was weightless. It wasn't a beam or a flare. It was a ring of light, flat and wide, with faint lines moving around its edge. The glow spread across the field, soft and even, casting no shadows. My first thought was that it was some kind of drone, but the way it moved. It didn't move through the air, it moved with it. Like the space around it bent just slightly wherever it went. I couldn't move. Not because I was scared though, maybe I was, but because something in me went still. It's strange to say, but I felt watched, not by eyes, but by intention. Like the thing knew every thought I was having. The hum grew deeper, shaking through my chest until it became a single high tone. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me. It kept rising until everything went white. The next thing I remember, I was lying on the ground beside the shed. The grass was wet. My shirt was damp with dew. The sky was a pale grey, just before dawn. My watch said 2:23 a.m. 3 hours were gone. My hands were trembling. My coffee mug was still sitting upright near the steps, steam long gone. Daisy wasn't anywhere. When I called her, my voice cracked, but after a few minutes she came crawling from under the porch. She wouldn't look at me. Her fur was stiff with mud, and she was shaking like she'd been caught in a storm. Inside the house, everything looked the same, except the clock on the wall had stopped at 11:17 p.m., the exact time I'd stepped outside. I wound it, but it refused to tick. I told myself maybe the power had flickered, but the lights worked. My phone worked. Only the clock had stopped. I tried to sleep, but my body wouldn't relax. My mind replayed the light rising through the trees over and over, each time more vivid than before. By morning, I decided to go check the field. The grass where the light had hovered was flattened in a perfect circle, 30 feet across. Not burned, not torn, just pressed down like something heavy had rested there for a long time. In the center, the soil was dry, even though the rest of the ground was wet with dew. I remember kneeling and touching it. It was warm. For days, I tried to forget. Told myself maybe I'd fallen, hit my head, imagined the whole thing. But then the dreams began. Every night, I'd see the same room. White walls, seamless, glowing faintly like the light had no source. I couldn't move my arms or legs, but I wasn't afraid. I was calm. There was a humming sound in the distant steady, endless sand sometimes, tall shapes moved in the corners of my vision. I never saw faces, just silhouettes thin, smooth, too still to be human. I tried to speak, but couldn't. The air felt thick, like I was underwater. But inside my head, there were thoughts that weren't mine, words without sound. I remember one clearly. We only borrowed time. Every morning after those dreams, I'd wake up feeling heavier, like gravity had changed just slightly overnight. My reflection looked off, my eyes duller, my skin a shade paler. The line on my wrist, the one I hadn't noticed before, grew more visible. 3 inches, straight, perfectly healed, as if it had always been there. One night, maybe a week later, I was sitting on the couch when I heard the hum again, faint, from outside. My stomach dropped. I muted the TV, and there it was, slow, steady, coming from the same direction as before. Daisy wind and ran behind the kitchen table. I got up slowly and walked to the window. The field was dark except for one faint glow near the center, the same circle. I opened the door and stepped out. The cold hit my face instantly, but the sound grew warmer, clearer, as if it was calling me. The glow was soft, pale, pulsing again. I took one step toward it, then another, and then I realized the light wasn't on the grass, it was under it. The earth was glowing from below, faint ripples of light moving like slow waves under the soil. My heart started to race. The hum grew louder until I could feel it behind my eyes. I turned to go back to the house, but I couldn't move. My body just froze. Not locked, not stiff, just disconnected. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The air around me shimmered, and in the corner of my vision, the trees bent slightly inward, as if gravity had changed direction. Then there was light again, soft, silent, all around me. I felt lifted without pressure, without touch, like floating inside a thought. And just before everything faded, I heard something inside my head, calm and emotionless, say, "You were seen." When I opened my eyes, I was in bed, sunlight streaming through the curtains. It was morning. The alarm clock blinked 9 a.m. My clothes were folded neatly on the chair beside me, but I didn't remember changing. For a long time, I just sat there, trying to convince myself I'd dreamed it. But dreams don't leave dirt on your feet. That day, my phone wouldn't turn on. The screen flashed white and died each time I touched it. The TV flickered when I walked by. My watch stopped ticking again. And when I looked in the mirror, that mark on my wrist now faintly glowing under the skin. Since that night, I haven't felt the same. Sometimes, just before sleep, I hear the hum again, low and steady, like it's coming from somewhere deep underground. It fades only when I stop resisting it. When I let my mind go blank, it feels like something is listening. I used to think peace was silence, but silence has a sound now, and it's getting closer. The hum never really stopped after that night. Most days I couldn't hear it, but I could feel it, like a faint vibration inside my bones. It followed me everywhere, in the car, at work, even in the middle of conversation. Sometimes it grew stronger when I looked at the sky. Other times it disappeared for hours, long enough for me to believe it had finally gone. But it always came back, as if it was waiting for silence. I tried to live normally. I fixed cars, bought groceries, waved at neighbors. Nobody could tell that anything was wrong. But inside, I carried a quiet that wasn't mine. At night, I'd wake up without knowing why, the room dim and still, a soft blue light brushing the curtains. It never frightened me. It just felt like someone was making sure I was awake. One morning, I found Daisy standing at the edge of the field again, her nose in the wind, her tail still. I walked up beside her, expecting her to bark, but she didn't. She just stared at the same spot where the light had been months earlier. The grass had grown back, green and even. Yet when I stepped onto that patch, the air felt colder, thinner, as though the ground itself remembered. For a long time, I thought about digging there. I even brought a shovel once, but the moment I pressed it into the soil, a pressure filled my head. Not pain, just a clear warning that said no. So I left it alone. Weeks passed. I stopped having the dreams. I stopped hearing the hum. For the first time since that October, I began to sleep through the night. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then, one afternoon in early spring, I was driving home from town. The road cuts between two hills before it opens onto the valley where my house sits. As I came around the bend, the radio turned itself on. No station, just static, and underneath it, faintly, the same deep tone I hadn't heard in months. My hands tightened on the wheel. The world outside the windshield shimmered slightly, like heat haze. I blinked, and it was gone. The tone faded. The static stopped. Everything returned to normal. When I pulled into the driveway, the clock on the dashboard read 5:42. Inside the house, the wall clock showed 6:07. I checked my phone, 5:42 again. The seconds on each device moved at different speeds for a moment, then aligned. I don't know what that means. I only know it left me sitting there in the parked car for a long time, staring at the dashboard as if it might breathe. That night I dreamed of the white room again. This time it wasn't empty. The shapes were closer, clearer, their outlines soft and luminous. I still couldn't see faces, only movement like slow water. I felt calm, almost comforted. One of them raised a hand, or what I thought was a hand, and I felt warmth spread through my chest. A thought formed, not in words, but in understanding. Observation complete. I wanted to ask what that meant. I wanted to know why me. But before I could think the question, another idea pressed gently against my mind. We study where time forgets itself. When I woke, the house was quiet, sunlight pouring through the window. Everything was perfectly ordinary, except for one thing. The clock on the wall had stopped again, but only for the 3 minutes between 3 o'clock and 3:03 a.m. I checked the security camera later that day. The footage showed nothing unusual until 3 o'clock. Then the image froze, not blank, not black, just frozen for exactly 3 minutes. When it resumed, the frame showed me standing in the yard, barefoot, looking up at the sky. I don't remember being there. After that, I stopped trying to explain. Some nights I sit outside, coffee in hand, listening. The stars here are endless. Every once in a while, one of them seems to move a little differently, pausing longer than it should before sliding away. I don't reach for my phone anymore. I just watch. People ask me sometimes why I never left this place. I tell them the truth. I don't feel like I can. Not because I'm afraid, but because I think they might come back, and I need to be here if they do. It's not obsession. It's more like unfinished conversation. Lately, I've noticed something else. When I close my eyes at night, shapes of light drift across the darkness. Tiny, quiet movements that seem to respond to my breathing. If I slow it down, they slow too. If I hold it, they pause. When I open my eyes, the room feels wider, like there's more space than before. Sometimes I wonder if that's how they see the world, not through distance, but through rhythm. Maybe that's what the hum always was. Not sound, but communication. A language built from vibration, reaching out to anything that could listen long enough. The other evening, I walked out to the field again. The air was still, cool, a thin moon hanging above the trees. I stood there until my eyes adjusted, and for a moment I thought I saw the faintest shimmer where the circle used to be. Not light exactly, more like a memory of light. The ground beneath my feet felt warm, just slightly, like an old machine resting after years of work. I stayed until dawn. Nothing happened. But when the first sunlight touched the field, I realized something strange. My shadow fell in two directions at once, one faint, one clear. I blinked, and it was gone. Now, every night before sleep, I think about those 3 missing hours. I try to piece together what might have happened, what I might have seen, but the harder I chase it, the further it drifts. Maybe that's how it's meant to be. Whatever they did, whatever they wanted, it was never meant for remembering. Still, sometimes, when the world is perfectly quiet and my thoughts begin to drift, I feel that soft vibration again in my chest. It's gentle, patient, almost kind. I like to believe it's a reminder that somewhere, just beyond what we can measure, there are beings who watch, not with eyes, but with understanding. I don't think they mean harm. I don't even think they mean help. I think they're just curious about us, about me, about time. Maybe, on some distant night, someone else will feel that same hum under their ribs and look up, wondering what it is. And maybe that's the point, not to know, but to listen. Because sometimes, when I'm lying awake at 2 a.m. and the house is still, I hear that tone again, soft and steady, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. I don't fight it anymore. I just let it fill the silence until the silence itself becomes sound. And in that sound, I almost hear words. Not clear enough to understand, not loud enough to fear. Just enough to know I'm not alone. If you ever find yourself awake in the middle of the night, with a hum you can't explain and a sky that feels too perfect to be real, listen closely. You might realize they've already been here.